Capacity Building Center for Tribes. My name is Jackie Croshoe, and I am an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band in North Dakota, and I'm happy to be with you today. I can see by the participants that you're slowly coming in, but for those of us with us, I just want to say thank you for joining us. I would also, and it looks like a couple of you have done that, but if you don't mind, go ahead and type your name and title or tribe into the chat room so we just can see who is with us. And I also want to just make sure and say, my wonderful colleague Esther Ann is with me today, and she will just help monitor the chat room for the presenters. So we know that empowering tribal nations to gather independently to strengthen their voice is essential, as well as the need to encourage our state partners to include our tribal nations as equal partners in child welfare matters. So we decided to deliver this series to you in just hopes of creating that energy. This series is really building a story just for all of you to learn about the hard work and accomplishments that have come out of New Mexico. And when we were planning for this webinar, we decided that it was best to deliver this in a 3-part series because we wanted to take the time for each and just to create some dialogue within all of these webinars. And so we will have an hour today, and then we will have part 2, which will be, again, another hour in part 3. And just to clarify, part 1 today is hearing from the tribes and the work they accomplished to form the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium, also known as NMTIC. Part 2 will be next week on September 8th, and we'll hear how NMTIC, this consortium, works with the State Department to improve outcomes for Native children and families, as well as the creation of the State Office of Tribal Affairs within CYFD. And then part 3 will be delivered on September 15th. And that's where we will learn how they implemented stronger ICWA protections in New Mexico, as evidenced by the recent legislation passed in July. So exciting stuff. I want to get started. I want to introduce you to some amazing individuals, and they will share with you today how 23 sovereign nations collectively came together to protect their children. So I want to be respectful of time, so I am just going to turn this over to our presenters. Julie, Jacqueline, Donalyn, feel free to unmute and take it over. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Yalch from the Pueblo of Isleta here in New Mexico. I'm the current ICWA coordinator. I'm sorry, I'm like looking back to my notes from 2015 when I was an ICWA coordinator. Right now, I'm the Social Services Director for Pueblo of Isleta Social Services, and I am the current New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium. I have with me my 2 sisters and forever partners when it comes to Indian child welfare that I will turn over to, starting with Julie and then Donalyn, and Donalyn will kick us off since she is our founder of NMTIC. Julie?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julie Bird. I work for the Pueblo of Nambe. I serve as their ICWA manager. I've been serving in that role for about 4 years now. And I also am a seated member of the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium. We may make reference to that long name as NMTIC. So I just want to kind of share that with everyone first and foremost. I also want to say thank you for affording me this time to be in you all's presence and to be able to share some really life-changing experience as a tribal Indian child welfare practitioner. And so I'm hoping that with the information shared today, you all will take what you can and make the most of it. So last but not least, saving the best for last, I would like to turn this over to Donalyn to give you all an introduction of who she is.
Goatsi, Kaitawa Hopa, Straya Shapdu, Shinameti Maitza, Eshte, Oshachanu Shata, Kohaya Washti Shata. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here and to be alongside Julie and Jackie as they deliver this information to you all. My name is Donalyn Sarracino. I'm the director for the Office of Tribal Affairs with CYFD, with New Mexico Children, Youth and Families Department, Office of the Secretary. Again, I super appreciate just an opportunity to be here and add whatever I can to this presentation in the development of the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium. So thank you all for allowing me to share space today.
Next slide, please. So our hope today in speaking with you all is hopefully we plant some seeds for you, whether you are here as a tribal worker or a state worker or another stakeholder when it comes to the compliance and implementation of the Indian Child Welfare Act. As most of you who are participating know, we are under attack with a number of federal cases that are pending to go before the Supreme Court that are challenging a number of areas in ICWA. And one of the things that stems and what we're hoping that you will gain here is the need for elevated tribal voices. Tribes can no longer remain silent when it comes to protecting our children and our tribal rights. So what we hope to deliver to you is looking at the unique way that NMTIC was developed and how to carry on these conversations within the tribe itself to make sure the tribes are ready. And then of course, to start that building relationship with your state agencies. We are all about collaboration and partnership with our state agencies. And we wanna make it something meaningful where it's not only going to touch Native children, but the hopes of spreading it to all of the child welfare agencies where all children are protected, their rights are heard, and the forefront of family and their culture is always front and center.
So Jacqueline, just to help get to know our audience a little bit, there's a poll question here. I don't know if you all can see it, but we would love for you to help us get an idea as to whether or not those of you that are participating in today's webinar, if you have a formal working group with other tribes in your state. So just a yes or no. And Angela will go ahead and show us what we have learned. Majority have 77% say they do have a formal working group with other tribes in their state. So that is good to know. Still 23% have answered no. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Jacqueline. Thank you.
Next slide, please. Donalyn.
Thank you. Sorry, had trouble finding my mute button. So the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium was founded in 2015, and this came really as a result of certain cases. I used to be the director for a tribal social service agency. And I was very new to protective services and running a tribal social service agency and ICWA program. My background happens to be as a mental health clinician, and so when very early on when I started in this position, we received some information on an ICWA case that was currently happening. I knew enough at that time, and this is my own ignorance early on in my career, really not knowing what ICWA was or how it impacted how it impacted our tribal communities. And I made it a point that, because I knew so little about it early on, really made it a point and a passion to learn all I can about it to ensure that ICWA was being complied with. And so the tribe I work for received a notice, and 8 months later, so that was it. We responded, right? These children are members as defined by custom and tradition for our tribe. And then 8 months later received a request to be a QEW in a termination of parental rights hearing. And I knew enough to know that was not right. Like a case doesn't start 8 months later, we're looking to TPR. And so thankfully the tribal administration that we worked for saw the importance of it and allowed us to really reach out to others and get the training needed. And so we hosted a couple of, I believe we called them listening, I think they were called listening sessions, or I just reached out to my tribal brothers and sisters to see if they were experiencing the same thing in our state, and they were. And so we had a couple roundtable discussions, and really thought that, I think like as one tribe, it's speaking separately, multiple tribes speaking separately, really felt that it was easy for, at the time, the state to ignore a tribe here, a tribe there. But when all the tribes came together, 23 tribes came together, it created this momentum of we can't and we won't be ignored anymore, and our concerns will not go unheard. And so in March, the consortium was formed, and several months later, that same year in 2015, a group formed called New Mexico Partners. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jackie and Julie.
So the major things that were identified by the tribes when we had our first roundtable discussion in Acoma in February of 2015 was a shared consensus amongst the tribes. We did have 19 tribes present when we had that roundtable. In New Mexico, there are 19 pueblos. There's 2 Apache nations and then Navajo Nation. And then we also work with Isleta del Sur in El Paso, New Mexico. Majority of the challenges that we identified during this roundtable where tribes were not receiving ICWA notices. We were receiving ICWA notices later in the stages when cases were going to termination of parental rights. We were also noticing that placement preferences within the tribes that each tribe has within their own community were not being followed, nor were the placement preferences of ICWA also being followed. Another major area, there was a lack of parental involvement. What I mean by that is a lot of the treatment and case plans that our state agencies were utilizing were cookie cutter cases. It was the same thing for our families that were not targeting why the children were entering the system in the first place. So those safety threats were never mitigated because it was not in their plan. It was not specific in their plan. And those were a lot of challenges that the tribes were sharing when we had this roundtable discussion. So we tried to figure out how we were going to do this. We knew that it needed to stop because it was exhausting. It was very exhausting for tribes to defend our positions individually. So we decided the need for a consortium would be impactful for tribal communities. And we looked at the state system that we were working with. So the New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families, we wanted to see what some were the barriers we were facing with CYFD itself. And again, this is a learning experience. This is by no way an attempt to set back where we are. with NMTIC and with CYFD, but this is our story and how we were created. So we noticed that a lot of CYFD workers, the CCAs, PPWs were not familiar with ICWA at all, and that needed to change. We noticed that there was no good collaborations or working partnerships with a lot of county offices and the tribes that were within those specific regions. That we noticed that there was no cross reportings to tribes when there was a child abuse and neglect referral coming in to the system, which needed to change. And of course, the placement preferences were not being followed. There were no ICWA specialists within the counties to help provide that support to CYFD workers. And there was no Native American liaison that was able to build that gap between the state and the tribe. A lot of tribes did not have intergovernmental agreements with CYFD that would also hold some meat behind the compliance of ICWA. So in addition, we looked at what was actually working with CYFD and tribes. We were able to access some of the trainings with the state agency that involved the safety and risk assessments. So we were able to jump onto those trainings to see how they were assessing families, but that also built the capacity for the tribes to strengthen what we were using as well in our own internal offices. We, in some counties, I will speak for the Pueblo of Isleta and Valencia County. Back then, Cynthia Shavers was the director, and she and Isleta did have a very strong working relationship, and that led to a number of early interventions that the Pueblo of Isleta and Valencia County under her leadership was able to strengthen, and we wanted that to spread across the state as well. We also noticed that in some counties, they would work harder on some reunifications, but again, the numbers were very small. After looking at what the negative impacts were and what the strengths were, we knew we needed help. Donalyn had a contact with Casey Family Programs that we were able to access some assistance and technical support with Melissa Clyde. We met the following month on March 20th, 2015, when NMTIC was officially established. At that time, we had 10 tribes present. We looked at our mission statement and what our overall goal was here as a consortium. And we knew we wanted to be our tribal representatives through the permission of our tribal governors to serve as representatives to advocate and preserve the culture, the traditions, and identities of all of our children by enforcing ICWA. With that, we knew that our vision was to collaborate and provide education to our tribal, state, and federal agencies in hopes of this stopping, in hopes of the compliance moving forward, and our children have these protections in place, and that the true spirit of ICWA is being implemented throughout the country, but more so within the state of New Mexico, because we are a very strong traditional state when it comes to customs and traditions. So the purpose of this, with the help of Casey Family Programs, was to look at what our full intention was moving forward. We knew that we wanted to keep our children connected to the tribe. We knew that we wanted to strengthen our own tribal perspective and educate ourselves in what ICWA was. We knew we needed more tools in how to enter a state court system and the child welfare system when we're advocating for our children in the system. Not only that, we needed to empower our own families when they come into these foreign environments that they're not familiar with if they're growing up in traditional communities and in the rural communities that are not, that don't have Western services or don't live in the modern conveniences of a white picket fence home, or things that have more of a luxury than living a very basic life. What we did was start creating what we wanted as a consortium. And we knew that we needed help with this. So with that, New Mexico Partners was established, and we met in 2015 with the Children, Youth, and Families leaders. We met with the office, the administration of Office of the Courts. We met with, I believe, New Mexico CASA through New Mexico Kids Matter. We met with the Tribal State Judicial Consortium, and we also met with another number of state stakeholders who were sharing in some of the same situations when it came to relationship and partnership building with the state and tribes. So one of the major things that we had to do was address the elephant in the room. What I mean by that is we had to admit that we're not talking with each other. We had to have these courageous conversations to identify why. And it truly was a meaningful conversation. And in reality, we don't know anything about each other. We didn't know how the tribes operate. We didn't know how the states operated. And it took this meeting, the first meeting with New Mexico Partners, to start building on that relationship and break through these walls to start this meaningful dialogue. Once the tension stopped, because we were able to have these conversations, the true work started to develop. And with that, our relationship started to form. I can turn it over to Julie to speak on her experience with how we started moving forward in our ongoing and current relationship with New Mexico Partners.
So thank you, Jackie. Just real quickly, before I go into that piece of sharing, as a seated member on NMTIC, as a representative of one of the 8 northern Pueblo communities in New Mexico, I, as a practitioner, being a participant in this particular consortium, have been afforded extensive knowledge when it comes to the Indian Child Welfare Act. With that knowledge that's been shared within this consortium, it provided me the courage and the strength to really advocate in the best way possible for the well-being of our tribal children when it came to compliance of the Indian Child Welfare Act. Nambe Pueblo has collected some extensive experience when it comes to ICWA cases. We actually have had cases in the states of Oklahoma, California, Colorado, and then again here in New Mexico in several counties. And as a participant of NMTIC, I've been able to really exercise my voice with the support of my tribal leadership to really advocate for that connection between the child and the tribe. And as that connection is really focused on and really looked at thoroughly, we've been fortunate enough to help also possibly educate some of the key players that work our ICWA cases. So I feel it's been a very fruitful experience in the knowledge that I've collected being a participant of NMTIC. So I just wanted to kind of share that because I really wanted to say, that I know that, we're leading towards how we start inviting the state partners in to be a part of our consortium, but I also wanted to share some of the benefits I've been able to acquire as a seated member of NMTIC that has really helped me to do the best of what I can as a practitioner for the Pueblo of Nambe. So with that, I will share a little bit of what I do know about NM Partners. I do know as a NMTIC member participating in NM Partners, it was a really interesting and powerful movement in respects to our time we gathered together, and we really had some honest conversations about what was working and what was not working from a tribal perspective as well as a state perspective. And so when you lay everything out on the table with regards to compliance with ICWA, I think that that's a really, really great foundation to really build upon when it comes to a true honest partnership. I don't want to go without saying though that I, for the foremost, am not a politician, so I don't know the rules of the playground when it comes to politics. And so I just know what I know as an Indigenous person representing an Indigenous tribe for the welfare of our children. So, you know, in my sharing time at NM Partners, you know, we were able to talk about culture and heritage, the values, the beliefs, the customs, the traditions of who we are as tribal nations here in the state of New Mexico. And my goal was to keep that in the forefront of any of the discussions or information sharing that I participated in this gathering with NM Partners. And so it was for a very short bit of time as an officer of NMTIC. I did see a lot of great, wonderful things birth, not only from NMTIC, but we go through this little transition of NM Partners. And what really came out of that is discussions of a possible ICWA court for New Mexico, specifically a pilot in the Bernalillo County area, because looking at information, or I call it information, some people call it data, but you know, depending on the number of cases within the different counties, the best and most appropriate fit to possibly start a pilot ICWA court and ICWA unit would be in Bernalillo County. And then also some other things that came out of those partnerships was the ICWA court to support, the ICWA unit, which was to help support the ICWA court. And so the ICWA court, I believe, officially started and was in and correct me if I'm wrong, Jackie, but I believe 2019 is when it officially kicked off for New Mexico and Bernalillo County. So I could be wrong, but I believe it's 2019. But so those are some of the things that I was able to witness firsthand through those partnerships between NMTIC and the NM Partners, stakeholders and representatives that shared in that time, in that space. We were able to have some very heartfelt discussions about ICWA and the compliance with ICWA. So I would like to turn it back over to Jackie. I hope I shared enough. If there's something else I missed or I kind of overlooked, please share.
Thank you, Julie. I'm not too sure what the next slide is, but one of the things that we forgot to mention, which is key, is the endorsement of all of our tribal leaders. The state of New Mexico has an all Pueblo Council of Governors that represents our governors here in New Mexico, and they meet on a regular basis regarding the issues going on in their own communities that will impact tribes. So NMTIC did go before all Pueblo Council of Governors for support on the consortium moving forward. The presentation involved why NMTIC was here and why it was needed. So one of the things that was asked is, what's the purpose? They had no idea what was occurring in their communities. For those of you who are not aware, the tribes in New Mexico changes leadership almost annually, if not every 2 years. And each tribe is very different and it's unique in their own way on how they either appoint or elect their tribal governors. So it's very difficult when the ICWA workers are trying to move forward in seeking leadership support when there's that consistent turnover with our leadership. So what we shared with our leaders in what our intention was as NMTIC was the need for the tribes to become well-versed in ICWA. We identified that tribes need legal representation when we're facing a number of challenging cases within the state agencies. A lot of tribes are representing themselves, and what I mean by themselves, it's the ICWA worker who often is going into the court representing the tribe. They're working the cases, they're doing the filings, and then of course ensuring that the case management is there. That was a need, and that's a goal of NMTIC, to find legal representation moving forward so that doesn't become a barrier when it comes to these legal litigation issues. The other thing is to make sure that our own leaders are well-versed in ICWA and now IFPA. The beautiful thing about this is we've seen from the beginning when we had our first Tribal Leader Summit, which is an ongoing goal of NMTIC to provide an annual Tribal Leader Summit hosted specifically by NMTIC. And this is for tribes by tribes again, to make sure that it's specific and it's focusing on the impacts in New Mexico itself. So this, it's a very intimate setting where it's highlighting the true issues and the positive changes that are occurring within the state of New Mexico. And what I've seen is how we've progressed with educating our leaders. We had an example I'm going to share in 2018 when we had our first ICWA NMTIC Tribal Leader Summit. We had a number of tribal leaders present. Former Governor Riley of Acoma, Pueblo was our keynote, and he really spoke to the impacts in our tribal communities. And he did a beautiful job representing the position not only of a governor, but as a father, and why it's so important for tribal leaders to get engaged in the onset of these ICWA cases to ensure that our children are not lost in the system and they have that right to continue practicing and be immersed in their culture and their community. And what we've seen stem since then is former governor of Nambe, Philip Perez, who was part of these initial summits, has now become a champion in ICWA, representing the compliance in ICWA, not only in state courts, but when we move to the development and passage of the New Mexico Indian Family Protection Act. And now what we're seeing is our leaders have now heard field workers understand and hear the true importance behind why ICWA is important, what implementations and implications are going to have in tribal communities if ICWA is shut down on the federal level. And they didn't realize that before, and they do now. So this ongoing communication and education is key. And that's one of our goals and initiatives moving forward as NMTIC, to make sure that our tribal leaders are well-versed and they know what is happening in the state system that is going to come back and have an impact in the tribal communities. I'm sorry, I think I lost. Donalyn, did you have anything else to add to this?
I really just want to say I'm sitting here like with the lump in my throat and my tears welling up. I haven't officially been part of the consortium now for several years since I left my my position with the tribe and am now the work for the state agency. It's kind of ironic, but it's just so exciting to see that how the work has continued to grow and how the members have continued to embrace their role as true advocates and leaders in New Mexico and the experts. You know, one of the things that we on the state end with the Office of Tribal Affairs and our Office of General Counsel and Office of the Secretary is constantly looking to our tribal partners as the experts on Indian child welfare matters, and really trying to instill throughout the department that we should not be making any decisions about tribal children and their communities without our tribal partners at the table. And I know we have some work to do still in that regards, and it's real hopeful and inspiring in the work that the consortium continues to do and carry forth. And I think that really speaks to the true intent of why it was founded, right? Like as a new tribal Indian child welfare worker, I knew very little and relied on the support from and guidance and encouragement from my tribal brothers and sisters to understand it and know what to do. And so just to piggyback off of what Julie said, you know, the encouragement, the support, one of the things that the consortium does is they staff cases, right? And so they meet every month and they staff cases and help guide each other through the process. So, you know, as a state, just because we think we're doing something over here, right, it doesn't mean that it's not going to get up to the tribe over here who has a similar situation happening in another state. And I think that speaks to the level of trust that the group has for one another and the respect that they have for one another to be able to allow that and to empower themselves to really learn and grow in these roles and to really help their tribal communities grow and to bring their children home. And so I'm just really I'm sitting here like it's just amazing to see the work that continues to be done. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Donalyn. The All Pueblo Council of Governors endorsed NMTIC in 2016 by the way of resolution that allows us to represent our own individual tribes as seated members of NMTIC. So again, with that, we were able to empower ourselves, equip ourselves with tools to ensure that we knew what we were talking about with ICWA compliance. With that, we developed the way our consortium meetings would be led every month. Our hope was to meet on a quarterly basis. However, so much going on, there's no way we can do it unless we're meeting monthly. Now, sometimes we're meeting every other week on special meetings with some of our subcommittees. So with that, oh, I have a, Jackie, is this poll supposed to be here?
Yeah, so the next question then is, if you answered yes to having a tribal working group, a formal tribal working group, how often do you meet? I know Jackie just mentioned that they meet monthly now, but do you meet monthly, quarterly, or yearly? We just want to get an idea of other tribes out there as they work together to do this, how often you are meeting. We recognize that even just the sustainability of our time together can be challenging. So I'm curious. And for those of you that, you know, are maybe listening by phone, you know, feel free to also unmute if you choose to do that. And Angela will give us the results. So it looks like half and half between monthly and quarterly. I'm glad some of you did not check yearly because that would be a long time in between. So good to know. Thank you for that. Oh, and there's another question here too. Let me just see if you can answer it in the chat room for us. I would curious whether the tribal groups meet with their state partners. When I asked this question about formal groups, I was referring to tribes working with tribes in their state. But the question is, you know, are you meeting with your state partners as well? So if you could let us know in the chat room whether or not you have a formal agreement to meeting with the state and your tribal partners or other key external stakeholders. So you can go ahead and let us know in the chat room, and we'll be sure to just keep moving this along as we read your chats. Thank you.
So if I can jump in here really quickly, I tend to do that sometimes, sorry. But you know, as people are, you know, sharing their input on the chat, one of the things I wanted to kind of backtrack, okay, we have the poll results. So one of the things I really wanted to quickly mention, I know it sounds like a huge obstacle in a sense of, you know, us sharing that 23 tribal nations, you know, somehow managed to come together and have a unified voice. That in itself is a huge accomplishment for the tribes in New Mexico, but it did and was possible. You know, our common goal is the well-being of our children, as well as, you know, that continued connection with who they are from the tribal communities they come from. And so, you know, I want to share with you that a lot of these 23 tribes, for those of us that get into like the funding piece of who we are as sovereign nations, we have in our 23 tribes on NMTIC, we have self-governing tribes represented at the table, and we have 638 tribes represented at the table. And we also have tribes that still utilize the Department of Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs social services to provide the social service piece for our families in need and tribal communities. So, you know, talk about, you know, having all these different little ways we're made up as sovereign nations in New Mexico. I really want to share with everyone on today that those also add to the uniqueness of who we are as sovereign nations when it comes to, you know, how we're kind of set up when we step off the reservation. So I want to share that with you, to not look at it as an obstacle, but more, you know, to encourage you all to stay focused on the goal at hand. So in spite of how uniquely we're all made up, you know, keep focused on the goal at hand, which is your children, and you'll all find reason and common ground to come together and be able to start building those trusting partnerships amongst tribes. Because I know that sometimes when I worked in child welfare, it's been a long time I've worked in child welfare, and I've been very blessed and privileged to work for several of the northern pueblos here in New Mexico. And everyone has their different outlook when it comes to child welfare. And so, you know, I just want to say that in spite of how we may look at child welfare as individual sovereign nations, you know, unfortunately, we found a common goal and we were able to come together. And that is how we're able to really reach out to one another, call upon one another, share experiences with one another to really exercise and apply the best of who we are for our tribal communities. So I just want to share that as well, because I think that that's also a very unique piece to who we are as NMTIC. And so with that, I know I want to turn that back over to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Julie. So we've reached a number of goals since our establishment in 2015. We were able to provide a number of training to NMTIC members regarding ICWA Basics, ICWA Advance, positive Indian parenting, substance abuse for working with families with substance abuse. We've had a true partnership with the National Indian Child Welfare Association, known as NICWA. They have been a huge supporter of NMTIC and our progress moving forward. They've helped us to provide that technical assistance. We have been able, again, to, with family programs, we have a draft of unified protocol and standards for foster care. Our goal is to utilize each other's foster placements when we are ready to move forward with the passage of our standards. Those will be unique to each tribe, but they have the core requirements of the federal requirements to ensure that our kiddos coming into care are 4E eligible. But again, it's the things that we can change are going to be specific to each individual tribe. We have unified forms that we share with each other. We have trained and identified a list of qualified expert witnesses within the consortium that with that training that we provided NMTIC, members are then able to share those tools to prep their own community members if they identify community members or other field workers or leaders to serve as QEWs within their own ICWA cases. We borrow from each other with QEWs. We were also able to advocate and work on being part of the ICWA court that Julie described earlier, the ICWA unit. Those again were the goals of NMTIC. And then our main one that was just accomplished in this year was the development and passage of IFPA. So the Indian Family Protection Act will be the third, I think we're going to discuss it in the third session. And I believe we're hoping to get in the nitty-gritty of the protections of IFPA in hopefully a fourth series with building. But a lot of these could not have been possible without the true partnerships that we have come to trust and embrace. And those partnerships, again, with NICWA, with Casey Family Programs, with the Corrine Wolf Children and Family Law Center, with the National Resource Center for Diligent Recruitment. We had the Administration for Children and Families, the Capacity Center for Tribes, and then the Tribal State Judicial Consortium are our true partners, in addition to strengthening our relationship and partnership with New Mexico CYFD. All of this would not have been possible without these stakeholders. We cannot express enough gratitude to everyone who has been part of the support with NMTIC. NMTIC operated in 2015 with $0. We have very little monies and we still operate out of pocket, or if we're able to find someone who will sponsor some things, that's the only way that we're able to move forward with the funding. But generous folks with that to the initiatives that NMTIC has created. So with that, I believe we open it up now to questions from the audience.
Can I really just jump in before the questions? So really quickly, I see some of my brothers and sisters who are seated members on NMTIC who are sharing in this space with us right now in this webinar. I want to just personally thank you for the commitment you also have made to NMTIC. I believe that, you know what, that should not go without being mentioned. Thank you. Your commitment is what has brought us here today to be able to share on this platform of how we as sovereign nations in New Mexico have come and become a unified voice on behalf of our tribal children that are connected to our tribes. So I really want to let you brothers and sisters know that a lot of this would not even be possible without your commitment and your dedication and your experience that you bring to those monthly meetings. And so I want to just share that as well. Special thanks to Donalyn and to Jackie. We know who our founder is. We know who our co-founder is. So, and we know the blood, sweat, and tears and the sacrifices you and your families have made to bring us to this place. So I just want to share that before we jump into the questions. So thank you.
Thank you.
I really
Julie.
appreciate that, Julie. And I just also want to, recognize that when we began engaging New Mexico in this conversation, there was never a time where I didn't hear you honoring and recognizing not only your tribal leaders, but all of, your tribal members who are experienced this system, but also those who have been doing this hard work in child welfare. You've always reminded me as we've been moving forward, how important this work is being done together. So I do want to open it up for questions for some of you out there who may be beginning to form a consortium. One of the things that I heard that I found fascinating from you all was that, you have, as tribes, began gathering to determine how it is and the approach you want to take in working with the child welfare system. I also saw in the chat room that there were individuals that perhaps are going to state-led meetings. And I just was wondering if there is something you could say about whether you are attending a state-led forum or whether it is the formation of the tribes coming together and the difference between that. If you could elaborate a little bit. Anybody else that has a question, please raise your hand, or if you have something in the chat room you want to ask our presenters. So as we start answering this question, we'll begin trying to answer other questions.
I'm assuming you're waiting for me to answer, Julie.
Do you see a difference?
We definitely see a difference. Again, our family is monthly. That's our NMTIC meeting. We always have the Office of Tribal Affairs through the New Mexico CYFD office. We're gonna speak more to that with Donalyn next in the next series on how that was created and the duties behind that. But when we are meeting with the state, and those are a number of state stakeholders through New Mexico Partners as one example, we are discussing these issues on a quarterly basis, and we're finding resolutions. So one of the key things which is beautiful about New Mexico Partners is tribes are voicing these ongoing issues and how can we fix it. We don't want to go to a meeting to waste anyone's time, and we don't want to leave there without a product or some type of a resolution moving forward. So that is one of the true trusts within New Mexico Partners, is that ongoing commitment. And although we can agree to disagree, we still know that there's change that's needed. And in order for us to have this change, we have to listen to each other. We have to respect each other and where we're coming from. Not only that, we need to look at the overall impacts and what the law is saying. The law is there, but it's not being followed. Why not? Where is the gap into where we need to focus on? And we have the leaders at these stake meetings where they're able to make these decisions and trickle it down to the field workers. And I hope that's happening. And I know we still have some trial and error with that. We still have some growing pains with that. We've had change in administration with the state of New Mexico and with the cabinet secretary itself that changed some perspective. But we also know that she has voiced her intent that the tribes are still a priority, and that collaboration and transparency and accountability for the state agency are still true to her. So we take that as, to be her word, and we're trusting that. We just need to trickle that down to the field workers. We hope that we can have that meaningful relationship with field workers moving forward, because that's where the impact is. That's where the true meaning is, when we're working to rebuild our families, where we're working to keeping our kids connected to their community and to keep them in their homes. So we need to start making that connection in the investigation piece, so we're not losing that. And that is going to be the most meaningful activity moving forward, is having these conversations in the initial part of these stages. But that needs to be done at the field level. And that's where we hope to start focusing on strengthening these relationships, is at the field level.
And really quickly, Jackie, I want to kind of, Jackie has shared a lot that'll lead us into the second webinar, and how things kind of, when the ball started rolling, what does that look like, and what has come out of that partnership between NMTIC and NM Partners, aside from the ICWA unit and the ICWA court. There's been a lot of things that are coming out that are all for the betterment and the support of our tribal children for New Mexico. And so aside from other questions that may be coming in, I really want to ask you all that have been able to share space with us today to really try to sign on to the second webinar, because there you'll get to really see and hear some of those meaningful partnerships that kind of flourished into some other forms of support and resources for NMTIC. And so just really quickly, I just wanted to just drop that in there.
This is Donalyn, and I had just one thing to add. You asked if there was what the difference was in regards to tribally led meetings and the state-led meetings that we've noticed. And one of the things that I've noticed really, and having been on the tribal side and now on the state side, right? Like, as tribal people, we love gathering. We love being in sharing space with each other. And oftentimes we're, and probably a lot so too because of the pandemic, but we're in meetings like Zooms back to back, right? So I can be in a Zoom meeting with somebody who's right next door to me. And so I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about NMTIC, and them allowing me to continue to share space with them on a monthly basis as an interested party. And I think that that's a huge thing, right? And meals, and how with the tribally led meetings, there's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of engagement, like how are you doing? How's it going, right? On the state side, it's like we assume everybody knows who everybody is and get started and have hard stops, right? and on the tribal side, there's no hard stops. They're still lingering out the door, and right, well wishes and all of that. And so I just encourage all of you on the call. I know there's a lot of tribal reps on the call, is to not be afraid of bringing that culture, right? Oftentimes we'll stop and say, can we open this meeting in prayer? Right. And just honoring who we are and the space that we're in and what we bring and what each of our relatives brings into the room. So I know we're at time, Tawa, again, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next series.
And Donalyn, that is exactly what I have come to appreciate, is the way that you guys have come together and organized yourselves in order to carry that unified message to the state system. So somebody asked, so part 2 is next week on September 8th. And we will hear again how the New Mexico Tribal Indian Child Welfare Consortium works with the State Department. And we'll talk about how they work to improve outcomes, as well as, you know, the creation of the desk that Donalyn has mentioned that she is in, but the creation of the recent new legislation of higher standards. So September 8th, and hopefully you all have registered. If not, watch for a second notice that will come out as a reminder. But I want to say miigwech. You ladies are absolutely phenomenal to work with. You're so brilliant, and it just, you know, has warmed my heart to work with you guys and communicate. And, you know, may you all have ease in your week. And I look forward to all of us gathering again next week. So miigwech, everybody. Thank you. And watch for the evaluations. Take care.